All right, so in this second video, what we're going to do is we're going to graph the raw data, figure out what the relationship is, and then we are going to do the transformation of the data. Okay, so to graph this data, we'll just go back here, and what we want to do is create a graph of our independent variable on the horizontal axis and our dependent variable on the vertical axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide everything here that I do not want to graph. So I'm going to click, what I do is to select this column, I click on C, and then I hold down Shift, and then I click on G, and that'll select all 5 of those columns. And then I right click, and then I can go to hide columns C to G. And now I can only see the data that I actually want to graph. So I'm going to graph the mass on the horizontal, period on the vertical, and then I'm going to use these uncertainties for my error bars. And in fact, because I want the units in my graph, if I do the units in the headings here, so I change that to seconds, and I add seconds to this one as well, then it'll automatically put the units on my graph in the program that I'm using. Okay, so this is what we're going to graph. We're now going to go to NZ Grapher. So you click on this, and we'll click Start using NZ Grapher. And we're given this starting data here, where we can go to Data and Reset. And what I'll do is I'll click back on my spreadsheet here, highlight everything that I want, and copy that. And then in here we can go Data, and we can go Import from Clipboard. And we'll click Allow. Okay, so now it's copied up my whole table, but that's okay. It just makes it a little bit more messy in here, but that's all right. It's probably useful to have it all here anyway. The graph type that we want is a scatter plot, scatter graph, like so. And the first variable is our x variable. That's our independent variable, and that's mass, which is in our first column. Our second variable is going to be the period. And here we can now see our data. And there are a few things that we want to do here. We can click more options here. And then we want our 0 point to be in our graph, because it's a bit hard to see what type of graph we have here. So our minimum x value is going to be 0, and our minimum y value is going to be 0. And then we'll update the graph, and now we can see that it's 0, 0 here. All right, so now this graph here looks like a sideways parabola, which incidentally is also what it should be, because that would be a square root relationship. That would mean t is proportional to the square root of mass. And if we look at the relationship that we were provided with here, you can see that t here should be proportional to the square root of mass, because mass is inside the square root sign here. Okay. What we can do if we want to make this, if we want to include our uncertainties here, is we can add horizontal error bars, and that's going to be our horizontal axis is mass. That's going to be our uncertainty in the mass. And you can see that they're very short because our uncertainty in the mass was very small. And then our vertical error bars we can change to uncertainty in the period. And that's a bit larger because our uncertainty in the period was more significant. And then because there's these big blobs in the middle, I'm just going to reduce the point size to as small as it possibly can be. And now we have this beautiful graph with our error bars. We can also fit a curve to this. And the curve that we would want to do is y is equal to a times x to the power of b, which looks like that. And now we can just copy this, copy image. And we can go in here and we can say, we'll go to a new page, Control Enter to go to a new page, and we can say graph of raw data. All right, and I'm going to just resize that because it's a little bit big for my page, like so. Okay. we can say this graph suggests that the relationship between the period and the mass suspended, the period of the cantilever, T, and the mass, M, is a square root relationship. Okay. So now we're going to transform our graph. So what we want to do now is, so that we can get an accurate relationship between these two things, is we want to change our x variable so that this becomes linear, so we can really see what the relationship is, or confirm that it is a square root relationship. So we'll go to a new page here and call this transform data. And I'm going to do that as a new graph here. So I will add this. So I'll call this, I'll rename this. I'll right click on this, rename it, and call it raw data. So that's the data we collected. And then we'll call this one transform data. So the way I created this second tab here is using this little plus button in the bottom. All right. And for our transform data graph, because we identified a square root relationship, we want our first column here to be square root of mass. And that's going to be in square root kilograms. Writing the square root sign in Excel or in Sheets is very hard, so, well, it's a bit fiddly. So I'm just going to use square root to represent square root. And then here I'm going to write equals square root, open bracket, and then go back to this tab here and click on this first value for mass, and it will square root that for me. So 0.2236 is the square root of 0.05. All right, and then I can complete that. I had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values. So those are all my square root masses. All right, if I square root the mass, I also have to change the uncertainty. And this is a bit fiddly, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I'll show you what the equation is to change the uncertainty and why it is that. So this is the uncertainty in the square root of mass, which is also in square root kilograms. And this is going to be equal to, we need the, so we take the proportion of the uncertainty here, so 0.001 over this, which tells us how big the uncertainty is compared to the mass. And when we square root, it's the same as taking to the power of a half. So we multiply this by 0.5. And that gives us the proportion of the uncertainty in our transformed value. And then we just have to multiply that by our new value. And that will give us the uncertainty in our new value. And I'll autofill that to do that for each row. Okay, and now we want to reduce these to one significant figure. Because all uncertainties should be to one significant figure. And there we go. And then these should match our uncertainty in decimal places. And this one should have 4. And this one should have 3. Okay. And yeah. And our next one, we want, for the vertical axis, we're not going to transform anything. So we're just going to have period again in seconds and uncertainty in period again in seconds. And so these ones, we're just going to actually copy the data from here. So this one is going to be, in fact, I'll just take it like so. I wonder if this will work if I just copy it and paste it. Nope. Okay, so when you have to paste special and paste values only. In fact, even better than that. We just click equals, period, enter, and then we can auto-complete that, and it'll just take it from there. And then we put equals, click back to this one, I'll click uncertainty and period, enter, and then we can autocomplete that. So now this data table has all of the data that we want in our transformed graph. So I'll make this graph as pretty as the other one. Here we go. And then we'll add some borders here and then copy that into our report. Paste unlinked. And then we want graph of transformed data. Okay, and I'll go over how to do the graph in the next video.